Hi, I am Vitold, and as I usually ask, please hear me out before proceeding with this video further. There is my full review of Honda Africa Twin 1100 in a separate detailed video that summarizes the bike very well. This video here is also not my full view on the bike, but the part that sums up what may cause certain problems for some of us if we would like to end up, or if we consider ending up with Africa Twin 1100 in our garage. And I have already made a video with the top reasons for buying the Africa Twin, and there are 7 different points. If you are only looking to further convince yourself, you might want to leave this video here alone and just head straight to that one. Now, if you are looking for a full view and want to be able to judge what you may potentially not like, and also what may annoy you potentially as well, and what could not work for you at all, and there are such things in Africa Twin, then yes, proceed and see what I evaluated for you. I realize that it's not exactly very trendy to say anything that's not awesome about the big, great Africa Twin, but otherwise it's pointless to say anything at all. If any of the reasons in this video will not apply to you, or you will be able to agree for some of those drawbacks, then at least you can be close to certain that Africa Twin may be a great bike for what you want it to do for you. So let's dig in, as I think that this is not a motorcycle for everyone with some pretty serious requirements. So why you might want to avoid it potentially. The first reason is that it can feel huge and it can feel really intimidating. It doesn't have to be a bad thing, but it can be. It did to me, and it did it right at the first sight. I haven't sat on the bike yet, and I'm 1 meter 83 centimeters tall, or 6 feet tall. So I'm not a very tiny man at the same time. And I got a bit worried about how I will be able to deal with such an enormous motorcycle. I felt the same with the biggest BMW GS, so the Adventure, the R1250 Adventure version. But there, this feeling disappears. It disappears once you start moving. And I hoped for this being the case with Africa Twin 2, but not. Even after setting off, reaching just a few kilometers per hour, you, just like myself, may not feel very confident on it. So it may be there when standing still, this feeling, and also when riding. It's not about the seat height, which is actually perfectly in line with the segment's standard, as it's at 85 or 87.5 centimeters, depending on the setting that you choose. So you don't need to worry here. It's first of all about the mental aspect of having that very wide tank and the super tall frame that holds the dash in front of you when you sit on the bike. It's also holding the lamp and the windshield, and it is really high so that there is enough of space for this also enormous huge wheel with a 21-inch rim and a lot of travel there. This is a bike that can really handle more rough terrain, but you've got to be equally big. So there are certain requirements for it to fulfill, to be able to do that. And those requirements may not suit everybody. Now, the second reason that is not as subjective as the mental perception of the things is that Africa Twin is pretty top heavy, and it is not very good and not very enjoyable when maneuvering. There is no problem with reaching the ground with your feet, generally, if you're over 1.70 meter or 1.80 meter centimeters tall, because the seat is also not too wide for somebody of, let's say, my posture, for example. But riding it precisely where you want it exactly, pointing it where you want it at low speed, just will not work here. Front suspension is soft in the first range of motion, the beginning of its motion, and the bike dives a lot. The front fork is long, the bike is tall, and it is not balanced that well. So it's a struggle, in other words, putting it simply. And I would totally consider giving up filtering traffic at some points, not only because the bike has very wide handlebar, especially with handguards, but because it's not stable and it is hard to steer below, let's say, 30 kilometers per hour. Now, try riding perfectly in a straight line, and man, you likely will not be able to do it. Do the same on a Ducati Multistrada 1260 or now the V4, and it'll be totally fine. Man, even Moto Guzzi V85 can do it. It's actually really good at that. Now, once you speed up on an Africa, it's fine, and you can control it the way you want it. It's also surprisingly eager to lean into corners, which is really cool when you're riding outside of the city, and especially on a mountain road. It's not that super precise and it won't follow like a train, but it doesn't fight with you in terms of leaning and how eager it is to cooperate. If you would compare it to a V-Strom 1050, that one will resist you much more. If you force it, it will follow, while the Africa will enjoy working with you in corners. But I think you've got to forget about many good experiences at lower speeds, unfortunately. That was my actually biggest and main issue with the bike, and took away most of the joy of riding it, as I had to go through the city in a large part, and that's how I ride, where I ride, and I would still choose an adventure motorcycle to ride the way I ride. If you don't have to ride in the city on a daily basis, this point may also drop on the list of potential deal breakers much lower perhaps. The third point may be there as an obstacle if you go for the DCT transmission, so the automatic transmission. Using it with buttons on the left hand side of the handlebar next to your left grip, well, it becomes even more complicated than it already is, with all the freaking buttons on the handlebar responsible for totally different and sometimes key also things like indicators and horn. And I think that Africa Twin may be the winner in the contest of the most buttons and switches, and making their placement and functions not understandable at all and the most confusing out of all bikes in the category. For example, to switch on the heated grips, if the bike has them, you've got to use two separate switches, with one being on the left side of the handlebar and the other one on the right side of the handlebar. Take into account that you've got one thumb to operate indicators and a downshift button, and also some other things. If you choose to use the manual mode, or just want to drop a gear or a few gears before you actually start accelerating or overtaking for the process to be smoother, you obviously cannot use them at the same time. You cannot use indicator switch and drop the gears at the same time. And right in that area, there's also a horn, so you've got 33% of chances of choosing the correct button out of the three, which are very close to each other, and that's a struggle. At some point, I simply had my finger right on the indicator switch at all times, and I had to give up on using the manual mode, as, well, I gotta tell you guys, the indicators actually felt a little bit more important to me in a high density traffic area. None of the riding modes is also perfect for all situations, so you will likely have to give away some amount of control regardless of the initial choice of the mode. But there's one solution which Honda offers to you, and it's actually awesome, which is that they let you equip your Africa Twin 1100 with an additional lever. Yeah, one more thing, but actually useful, a lever that goes exactly into the place of a regular gear shift lever in a motorcycle with a manual transmission. So you may have two solutions in one, and I personally would be very much interested in such solution. I would try to find a way to get rid of the buttons, which I know may not be possible. Technically it's not possible, but that would make things actually much easier. I mean, the buttons next to the handlebar for downshifting and upshifting. And by the way, the downshift button is underneath the handlebar and the upshift is on top, so that you have to use your pointing finger, and two fingers at the same time have to be available for you. It makes kind of sense, but may also need some time to get used to. And remember, which one is which? Is this a downshift button or is this a downshift button? However, the bike is very foolproof and it won't let you drop a gear when it's not possible due to the RPM being too high. The DCT system and the way it changes gears and when it changes gears is really awesome. And there's really nothing to be afraid of in terms of operation at all. It's very close to perfection, very safe. It sometimes switches gears in different moments than you would otherwise want it to, but that's understandable. It's got its own brain and it's not telepathically connected to ours, so that will always happen, just like in a car. But that's why those different modes and manual selection makes some sense. Now, you can use the fully manual mode if you want, and I would say that mechanically and software-wise, I think it's probably the best execution possible by Honda, but the layout is just screwed up and it's just too much for 2 hands, 2 eyes, and 1 brain and 10 fingers to manage at the same time. Number 4 on the list is that Africa Twin is not very comfortable. I don't think it is comfortable. This is my personal feeling comparing to all other motorcycles within the category that I've ridden. So quite many of them, in fact. The seat is very, very hard, likely the hardest seat out of all the seats on all motorcycles. It's not too wide, thankfully. It's thankfully also not too narrow. So my issue is not there, but it's in the cushioning inside of it. There are a little bit of hard edges on the sides of it, but it's not that terrible too. It's just really hardcore hard. This wouldn't suit me, and I would definitely myself replace it or modify it to likely add some foam on top or remove the hard parts and put some soft parts instead. The position behind the handlebar is fine, and also the knee angle is totally comfortable for me at 183 centimeters tall or 6 feet tall. This was the big plus, and I was riding in the lower seat setting at 85 centimeters. There's also still an option of raising it by 2.5 centimeters to 87.5 centimeters, and I think that could be great for many people. The handlebar is also very wide, and it didn't bother me in any other way than being just hard to squeeze between the cars because of its width, and sometimes I just had to give up. Still, the width was a smaller challenge rather than instability, which I mentioned before at low speeds. On the GS, I would definitely go and squeeze through next to the cars without even slowing down. Here, not really with the Honda. The suspension is soft only till some point pretty early on, then it becomes quite harsh on larger bumps and irregularities, and this very quickly takes away the remaining feeling of comfort, which hasn't been already taken by the very hard seat. So the thing is to ask yourself one question: do you care about comfort or not? This makes not that much sense to even consider if you are going to use the Honda Africa Twin off-road, because then the suspension will do well in not transferring all the small shaky surprises through your body to make the jelly out of it, and at the same time it will not allow the bike to drop too much and to bottom out, and also to hit some things that might be underneath it with its engine cover. Yeah, it will likely not bottom out very easily thanks to getting much harder at those certain points. But if you think about using Honda daily and not that much off-road, or you want to ride it for long trips, I guess it's not worth to take this option into account, at least not that much, unless you really like suffering. The fifth point is basically a summary of other pieces of how Africa Twin does in certain conditions, and it comes with the conclusion that if you don't plan on going off-road, I'm not sure I see a point of choosing it. There aren't many benefits when riding it in the city. Maybe the DCT transmission, which is unique, but in every single aspect there's some bike that does this thing better, or does most or many other things much better. And I get that it's a big statement, and Africa Twin can be a very enjoyable bike. Outside the city it may do fine on a nice twisty road, which can be surprising, but there are bikes that do this even better within the category, and they can still go off-road. The sixth reason may be that it's not as powerful as also some competition with a similar engine displacement and similar idea. Watch KTM. So Honda's doing okay till, let's say, 140 kilometers per hour or somewhere around that, but it's not matching what you can get for the price. Especially horsepower rarely is the main priority here, but it's a nice addition if you have a lot of power and torque available. You may use it or you may not use it, but at least you can if you need it or if you want it. Now, does that really matter? And is that a problem? I confidently say no. It's not the case of Africa Twin. It's only a downside if you've got a big ego and you get into conversations with your buddies who ride KTMs, Ducatis and BMWs, which in some top models can have even 50% more power and will just, smoke the Africa just like that. They may sound worse, those motorcycles, because Africa Twin sounds freaking awesome. Well, to me that matters, for example, but still, it's like bench pressing. Everyone compares the number, how many kilograms you're able to lift. And if you're way below the big boys, even the legendary name may not satisfy you fully. This probably wouldn't be the case of so many of us, but still it's better to have it if you can rather than not have it, and I mean performance and the figures behind the performance, the power and torque. The seventh reason why you might want to avoid Honda Africa Twin is that it may turn out massively overpriced. If you can afford it, especially the Adventure Sports version, then you at the same time can afford most bikes in the category. Unless you are an Africa Twin fan specifically, or a Honda fan in general. Base Africa is 25% more expensive than base BMW F850 GS. The Adventure Sports version without the automatic transmission is 4% more expensive than the base BMW R1250 GS. And with the version with DCT automatic transmission, it is over 10% more expensive than the big GS in its base version. I'm referring to the GS because it's often considered the category's benchmark and a leader, and I get it. And it's also from a premium brand, and that also has to mean something. And here we've got a Honda that has a good image, but across the whole automotive industry, you don't really compare Honda to BMW, right? So there's that. Now, the last eighth reason is the dash that pops out an annoying message every time you start the bike, and you cannot quickly get rid of it, as you need to select the display button, even though it's the only one displayed at the moment, and then accept it by clicking again. Or you've got to touch the screen to accept it. It takes a lot of time, like a half a minute in total, and that's ridiculous. I know that this would be driving me nuts every time, and I would just start off the day by being pissed at the bike. And that's totally useless. That's not the point. In general, there is way too much stuff on the display after you actually get to see all the data and settings in the main screen. But this you probably may get used to. And also trying to understand why a certain button does the thing that it does, and why it's placed here, and why some settings and icons mean the things that they mean, and they are positioned exactly or placed in those specific spots that they are. So that would be all of the things that presented some sort of issues for myself and would make me actually think twice about spending my money to be able to keep the Africa Twin in my garage. And I hope that you guys found this video useful, and please do let me know which things would really matter to you and which would not apply to you personally. That would be actually great feedback to all of us. That's it from me, and I suggest that you also see the video with the reasons to buy the Africa. So see you in the next video. Bye!